Welcome, everyone. It's the top of the hour, and I hope you're excited to jump in. My name is Kim Smith, and I am a program coordinator for OneOp. It is my pleasure to welcome you to today's session, Empowering Military Spouses to Maintain Employment, a review of the resources for holistic report support. In case you're joining us for the first time, I'd like to give a brief tour of our webinar platform so you can find your way around. Hopefully, you are currently able to view the slides we're sharing. If you're unable to see them or have any other difficulties, please email us at contact@oneop.org for tech support. Throughout today's webinar, we will be inviting you to join us in the chat. To embed the chat pod so you don't miss any links or conversation, simply place your cursor over the shared slides. You will then see a toolbar pop up across the bottom of your screen. From there, just click the chat bubble icon. When typing questions or comments, please be sure to select everyone from the response option drop-down menu so everyone is able to view them in the chat pod. We will have a few minutes at the end of today's presentation to answer questions, so please ask your questions in the chat pod. Please note that the slides and resources are available for download on the event page for today's session. We will be covering continuing education information at the end of the webinar, so please stay tuned toward the end if you're interested in continuing education credits or a certificate of attendance. Finally, closed captioning is available for this webinar. You can turn on the subtitles via the Zoom toolbar. Thank you for joining us as we continue our partnership with the Department of Defense and the U.S. Department of Agriculture to expand the readiness, knowledge, and networks of the professionals supporting our military service members and their families. It is my privilege to introduce Carrie Carter as our guest speaker today. Carrie is a mixed methods researcher and career advisor who specializes in military family career development. She holds a bachelor's in organizational management, a master's in higher education leadership, and will complete her PhD in sociology in May of 2025. As a current research consultant, she supports employers and nonprofits with evaluating and improving their professional development programs to meet the needs of military families. She serves on the Armed Forces and Society Advisory Board, as well as on the Board of Veteran Studies Association, and is a reviewer for the Journal of Veteran Studies. She is an active duty Army spouse and enjoys volunteering in her local Fort Liberty, North Carolina community. Thank you so much for joining us, Carrie, and I will now turn it over to you to begin our presentation.
All right. Thanks for that introduction, Kim. I am excited to be with you all today for this very important topic. Military family career development has been the subject of my professional practice for the past 8 years. I began this work as a researcher, studying how universities can best support military-connected students, then working in university career services, helping military-affiliated students put this research into practice. How do we get great jobs? And then I transitioned to supporting employers in acquiring and retaining military talent. As Kim said, now I'm a doctoral student, and my work connects these domains by examining how to best support professional development needs for service members, for military spouses, and for veterans across the military family life cycle. Much of this work is motivated by my personal journey, moving with my husband across the country as an active duty Army spouse, and witnessing how my friends and colleagues navigated hard professional choices due to military lifestyle constraints, as well as opportunities. I'm excited to share insights and practical tips for supporting military spouse professional development with you today, particularly as they relate to the transience of active duty military life. I would love to know what brings you to today's session. Please take a moment to just briefly share where you're joining us from today and how your work or your personal life connects to today's topic, as I'm hoping in this session we can learn from one another throughout the presentation. Today's presentation reviews current literature from the fields of public health, medicine, business, and sociology about how military spouse and underemployment influences military family financial, physical, and social health. Then, using what's called a socio-ecological framework, we will review how barriers to employment that you may be familiar with at multiple levels of influence across the military family life cycle may inhibit long-term spouse employment. Finally, we will identify together how Department of Defense, employer, and nonprofit resources can address holistic military spouse employment needs and help reduce the cumulative effect of military life opportunities and stressors that prevent military spouses from working. I see several folks are introducing themselves and letting us know where they're joining us from in the chat. I appreciate that and encourage you to continue doing that. I see we have someone from Chicago, Raleigh, Greenville, New Mexico. I used to live in El Paso, Texas, so I have an affinity for New Mexico as well. Looks like we have representation across service branches as well, Georgia. So welcome. We'll have several opportunities like this to make this an interactive session and co-construct knowledge together. Or by that, I mean learn from each other's unique professional and personal backgrounds as they relate to our topics today, military life, career development, and health. I hope that you'll participate and share your perspective because by the end of the session, we will all have more experience identifying barriers to military spouse professional development and offering culturally responsive and evidence-based resources for holistic support. So thank you. And thank you for joining us for those of you where it's a little bit earlier than it is for me on the East Coast here in Fayetteville, North Carolina. So let's begin by talking about military spouse employment broadly. As a scholar practitioner, I always like to start presentations with data. First, it's important to get a sense of the scope of military spouse life experience and employment. In 2021, there were nearly 600,000 US active duty spouses. Active duty spouses have a 21% unemployment rate. This rate was 4 times the national unemployment rate in the US overall in 2021 and 5 times the rate for veterans. Even more significantly, perhaps, there has been no statistically significant change in this rate for military spouses since 2015, despite military spouses seeking work. Specifically, among those who were looking for work in 2021, the Department of Defense reported that they spent 19 hours per week engaged in their job search on average. So that's essentially a part-time job looking for work among those who were looking for work. As you may be aware, there are many factors associated with military life that may contribute to unemployment for military spouses. Frequent relocation, lack of access to consistent and affordable childcare, the instability of service member operational tempo, their daily jobs and responsibilities, and the demands of both the military and family institution are all well-documented challenges that may prevent military spouses from maintaining meaningful, sustainable employment. Specifically, about half of the respondents to the 2021 active duty spouse survey indicated that finding employment was a critical problem associated with their permanent change of station or PCS move, something that 28% had experienced within the last year. So military spouses in the active duty community are moving often and find that to be a major barrier to their employment and specifically sustained employment. The majority of active duty spouses also have children in the home whose childcare needs may influence their ability to work. The ability for military spouses to find and maintain employment throughout the military life cycle is not only an issue of financial security for military families, but also one of well-being. Economic stability is one of the US Department of Health and Human Services 5 key social determinants of health, or conditions in the environment where people are born, live, learn, work, play, worship, and age that affects a wide range of health, functioning, and quality of life outcomes and risks. You can see the social determinants of health listed here. Just like access to healthcare, Quality education, social relationships, and neighborhood resources are important factors that contribute to military spouse health. The ability to find and keep a job can support or deteriorate military spouse health in multiple ways. As you might imagine, research provides strong evidence of a positive association between military spouse employment and health for those who want to work and are employed. For example, studies find that employed military spouses report lower rates of major depressive disorder, greater rates of marital quality, and greater self-esteem and self-worth. But this is certainly not an exhaustive list. I would love to hear from you in the chat what other health benefits you've seen or heard reported by military spouses who are employed. We'll take a minute and let us know what you've seen as positive health benefits that may expand beyond this list for those who are employed and want to be employed in the military spouse community. Yes, thank you. So someone has mentioned independence. Absolutely. That can be financial independence. That can also be a sense of social independence or a lack of a feeling of dependence. Creating a sense of community and well-being. Yes, that's something we're going to talk about later in the presentation as well. Social isolation can be a challenge for military spouses, particularly because we move often in this community. So having a community of coworkers can help to counteract that challenge. What other positive health outcomes might there be for those who work and choose to work, want to work? Something that comes to mind for me in my work as a career advisor with military spouses is a sense of confidence. That's something that the literature is beginning to talk about related to experiences of work for those who want to work and are employed. But I can see on military spouses' faces when we've been working for some time to find a role, particularly a role that they can keep, this sense of kind of exuberance and optimism about not only their life, but military family life broadly when they're able to find a job that is affirming for their lifestyle. Kristen shared benefits at work, professional development, retirement, EAP, absolutely. So there may be benefits beyond just the financial benefit, but total compensation benefits that military spouses are able to access as associated with their employment status. That's a great example. Feel free, as you think of other positive health outcomes, to share those in the chat as well. Of course, where there are positive health outcomes for those who work, there are also negative health outcomes for those seeking work. Research provides evidence of negative health outcomes for those who want to work but are unemployed broadly, but specifically as well for military spouses. Members of this group report higher rates of food insecurity, higher rates of anxiety, and lower rates of life satisfaction. These negative outcomes may not only affect the military spouse. Research finds that negative health outcomes associated with unemployment can spill over to service members, children, and extended family members, affecting the overall health of the entire military family. So of course, this as well is not an exhaustive list. These are common themes we see in the literature about the experiences of military spouses who want to work but are not employed. Another participant in the chat shared that a positive health outcome might be self-gratification and dignity associated with work. Those are certainly things anecdotally that I have seen in my work with military spouses as a career advisor. And the reciprocal effect of those things may also be present for those who are seeking work and are not employed. Thank you for sharing that. The employment challenges that military spouses face through the military life cycle are often numerous and complex, making it difficult to identify solutions that allow them to find as well as keep employment. So what we'll offer today through this presentation is a framework to help us think about military spouse employment from a systems perspective. That is how different levels of influence from individual level factors, Do family, community, and even institutional factors combine to affect military spouse employment outcomes? This is intended to be a helpful framework for us to think about as practitioners when we are supporting military spouses' diverse employment needs. Ecological models or socio-ecological models can help us visualize this system's perspective by identifying how factors at various levels of influence, including policies and environmental contexts, can impact a particular individual level outcome. So in our case, the ability of a spouse to gain and maintain employment. This socio-ecological model that you see here was developed by the Military Spouse Employment Research Collective in 2023 to examine the various factors impacting military spouse employment beyond individual level barriers. Military factors such as the frequency of service members' deployments, relocation timelines, or plans to exit service, along with environmental factors such as the types and numbers of jobs available in particular military installation communities where military families live and work, education and licensure requirements in those communities for those specific occupations, and the availability of childcare can either impede or improve military spouses' employment opportunity, just to name a few. Of course, again, this framework is not exhaustive, and I'd love to hear from you what other examples of individual, family, military, or environmental factors you've seen or heard about impacting military spouse employment. Let us know in the chat. I'll give you some time to respond here. Top of mind challenge that I see often as a career advisor working with military spouses is exactly what Chris just dropped in the chat. Thanks, Chris. Access to training and education. I can share from my own personal experience that I am a doctoral student, as was shared at the beginning of the hour. But I attend school almost an hour and a half from where my husband and I live near our military installation. I'm grateful to be able to attend a university and pursue doctoral studies, but certainly that journey can be a barrier for military spouses, depending on where they're physically located, as well as perhaps access to online universities and degree programs. Another person in the chat responded, civilian community response and supports, also cultural competency around military culture. Absolutely. So awareness of some of the challenges that military affiliated students and professionals face on the job market and in educational settings can be a barrier, as well as the supports just within a community. Neighbors, friends, folks that are part of faith-based communities that can provide that peer support when you have changes in military factors such as deployments, relocations, challenges the service member may be facing, these common challenges facing military families overall. Other environmental factors that we can think of that might impact military spouses' individual level outcomes. I always enjoy asking military spouses that I work with physically where they're residing and what types of jobs they've seen available in those areas. When I think environment, I think we often think about climate and weather, but there are certainly geographic factors that influence the types of opportunities that folks are looking for in an area. For example, when I lived in El Paso, a common barrier facing many military spouses in our community was many of the service members and spouses in our community were not bilingual, but a variety of the service occupations that were actively seeking candidates required you to be able to speak Spanish and English. And so that was an environmental factor that was one of the potential barriers and opportunities, to the extent that there was an educational opportunity for folks to learn Spanish that they might not have experienced were they working somewhere else. This is a classic example of an environmental factor that we might not think about until we get to discussing with a military spouse the variety of individual military and environmental factors that they see as barriers or opportunities to their employment. Because of the breadth and complexity of potential barriers and opportunities military spouses face navigating employment, it can be helpful to use a systems perspective to identify them. So in the next two slides, we will hear two hypothetical vignettes of military spouses facing employment challenges to help to demonstrate two things. First, how a variety of spheres of influence intersect to create barriers to employment for even currently employed military spouses, as well as the value of a systems perspective for examining the holistic military spouse employment experience. This is Jackie. She works as a pharmacy manager for a national pharmacy chain. Her family is PCSing, so moving to New Mexico with the military. She plans to use her employer's job transferability policy, to allow her job to move with her. But unfortunately, her pharmacy chain does not have offices in New Mexico. The closest location is 2.5 hours away. That location doesn't have any pharmacy manager roles, so her employer offers her a retail associate role outside of her practice area that she's not interested in, and offers a much lower hourly wage than her current salary. She's also unsure if she can keep her pharmacy license when she moves, and is concerned about how much it will cost. Not to mention, her family is moving during the summer. All of the local summer camps are booked out, so she also has to manage childcare. Let's start in Jackie's case by identifying individual or family level factors that will influence Jackie's employment opportunity in this case. What do you see as potential barriers here for her maintaining or finding new employment when she PCSs? You can drop what you see into the chat. Or if you're not sure, you can share you're not sure. Thank you. Nina says, childcare, since it's summer, spouse's work schedule in relation to childcare, whether they have two reliable cars for access to travel. Yes. Thank you, Nina. The cars in particular is a huge factor, particularly with how quickly military spouses might be able to get back to work, how much time they may be able to take off from work if they're attempting to maintain their role through that PCS. If they're moving overseas and they're shipping a vehicle, perhaps, when that vehicle will arrive, if they need to be in person at their location for work. Helping children with an adjustment for the move. Natalie shared that in the chat. That's another great point. There are a lot of feelings involved with moving, new assignments, relocation, regardless of when that happens. Oftentimes, military spouses are providing primary caregiving responsibilities during these transitions due to military family and specifically service member job requirements and responsibilities. So there may be things that you have to support your children with when you move that prevent you from hopping right back in as a manager of a pharmacy somewhere else if that opportunity is available. Yes, Michelle shared a need for license in a new state. So that was part of Jackie's story as well, or where they're moving to. Absolutely. So licensure can exist at a regional level. It can also be a state. It can be national or federal. We'll talk a little bit more about licenses when we get to resources, but these are environmental considerations that certainly are going to play a role in Jackie's ability to maintain employment. Another participant mentioned base housing and the availability of house and apartment rentals. That is great. We often assume that when folks are relocating, they're immediately going to be in a nice, organized home, just like they were before they left. And that's not always the case due to availability of housing in the region. Sometimes folks are displaced from a home, living in a hotel or temporary housing until they're able to move into on-base or off-base housing. Getting children enrolled in school is another form of labor that is necessary with relocation. Moving and settling into a new home while looking for a job is also challenging. And then the unemployment gap, as raised by another participant in the chat, is a challenge as well. When all of that form of labor takes a precedent, becomes what you're prioritizing in the beginning of that move, and there is time between the previous role and the next role that you're going to take on, that can be a challenge as well, creating individual barriers. Nora shared the availability of before and after school programs. Absolutely. And so even if you are relocating during the school year, in this case, Jackie may be relocating during the summer, but once the school year starts back up, however soon that may be, because summer is always faster than we expect it to be, then you may not have coverage for your childcare during that full day when you were required to be at work. Your hours may change when you work, even if you're able to maintain that same position and transfer your role to the new location. And so that's a factor as well, especially if you're relocating somewhere where you don't know family or friends that might be able to step in those temporary child care gaps in the morning or evening. Just finding a care person can be challenging. Natalie shared the first PCS is stressful, lots of learning, moving pieces, things that you don't even anticipate you're going to have to navigate come up. So those are great examples of environmental and military factors that extend beyond what is maybe impacting military spouses at the individual level. Oftentimes we hear individual level discussions of challenges such as motivation to look for work or access to internet, perhaps something like that. These are definitely challenges, but they may be just part of the story. Now we'll look at another hypothetical example. Now meet Jason. Jason is a software analyst whose partner is an active duty aviator. Every 2 or 3 years, his family relocates to a new duty assignment. His employer has offered him the option to move his role to remote, which will allow him to maintain employment, avoiding a gap in his resume, a community of coworkers, and the dual family income they have come to rely on. But unfortunately for Jason, his new duty installation has no immediately available childcare options, many of you just raised, requiring him to watch his 2-year-old and 4-year-old in between his working hours. He finds the modality challenging, especially lacking dual monitors that he had in the office, and the lack of an ability to brainstorm troubleshooting solutions with coworkers in real time. He struggles with the loneliness in the new community, where he has little ability to meet new people because he's working many long hours to keep up with the productivity he had in office. On top of it all, his partner is getting ready to almost immediately deploy after they relocate, requiring Jason to manage the majority of unpacking, setting up services, and daily familial responsibilities. So again, like we did with Jackie, I'd like to pause here and ask you what you see as individual, family level, military, or environmental factors that might be influencing Jason's ability to maintain employment, even given this potential option of relocating or transitioning to a remote role. I'll pause here while we think of some examples. Let us know in the chat. These are great examples. Thank you. Lacking an immediate support system is certainly a challenge facing Jason. Overall, the support transitioning to a new role can be challenging, even if it's the same set of job responsibilities. A different modality is something that is a challenging transition to navigate, especially when you're also managing childcare responsibilities. Too much stress because Jason is or will be single parenting and cannot maintain a quiet work environment, even though he can work remote. So sometimes those job responsibilities and remote environments can spill over to evenings and weekends, when you also have childcare responsibilities. Fast enough internet was raised by Nina in the chat. That's a great example. So just because you're relocating doesn't mean you're going to have access to internet right away or as strong as you might need or want for a software analyst. Depression, isolation, and being overwhelmed were raised by Michelle as potential individual level factors that are certainly influenced by the degree to which you're near family and friends. Childcare options. Yes, these are all great examples and hopefully allow us to be able to see how not only individual feelings and experiences are impacting Jason's ability to access employment and maintain employment through this PCS, but also Jason's partner's work responsibility, also what is available in the community to the degree to which there's high-speed internet and internet access quickly, the degree to which the home offers space for a home office. All of these factors that may be beyond Jason's control that we need to consider as we're trying to provide holistic support to military spouse professionals. And Natalie shared as well, balancing work and childcare at the same time, certainly. So as we discussed, even when you have a daycare or pre-K environment that you're able to enroll your child in quickly, you may have after school or before school responsibilities, weekend activities that require your attention and might compete with the energy that you're able to put into your online role. Thank you for these great suggestions. It helps us to start to think about how we can apply resources to address each of these levels of barriers military spouse employees face. Now we'll transition to talking about resources for holistic support, whether they're individual, military, or environmental solutions to meet needs. We've practiced using a system perspective to identify how multiple levels of influence create barriers to employment. And now we'll transition to discussing what Department of Defense, employer, and nonprofit resources can help to mitigate these barriers. We'll discuss how these resources can offer military spouses support at each of these levels, creating a holistic environment of support that may more comprehensively address their needs than individual resources. We'll start by discussing resources for finding a job that can help alleviate barriers to finding employment at the environmental and military levels, including career fairs, job boards, military talent resources, and fellowships and returnships. As we review these resources, I'm happy to have you all, as the members of this learning community, share other resources that you're familiar with that you have seen help military spouses in their employment journeys that fall into these categories. All of these resources are linked in the slides that are provided on the OneOp event website. So you can access more information about the specific details of each of these resources, but certainly there are many that I won't be able to cover in detail throughout this short presentation. So please feel free to share your resources or awareness of opportunities as well in the chat. As you're likely aware, applying to jobs in the digital age can be overwhelming, especially for applicants who are new to local job markets and struggle to determine which jobs are worth applying to and when. Sociologists of work refer to this digital labor market phenomenon as a black hole, where applicants often send out dozens of applications into the digital universe, never to hear anything back. There are two environmental solutions available to help military spouses narrow their job searches to opportunities specifically seeking military-connected talent. First, in-person and virtual hiring events can make the job search process feel more personable and less overwhelming. In addition to on-installation career fairs, Recruit Military is an organization that offers in-person and virtual career fairs for military talent. Hiring Our Heroes, a national initiative of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, also offers regional hiring events to connect military talent with meaningful employment opportunities. These targeted hiring events, along with virtual job boards, like the Military Spouse Employment Partnership Board, can help military spouses cut through the noise of massive generalist job sites to find openings with organizations committed to recruiting and retaining military spouses. In particular, MSEP allows spouses to filter by telework and remote positions for those looking for jobs that can move with them. These resources are linked throughout the slides for more information. But when a military spouse says, there are so many jobs out there, I don't even know where to start, these environmental solutions are a great place to help tailor some of these job opportunities to roles that might be sustainable for military family life cycles. Research suggests that military talent respond well to individual points of contact, such as other military connected employees, human resource points of contact, and instructors when folks are navigating unfamiliar professional environments. So, in many cases, you all may be that point of contact, aware of military family life experiences with high levels of military cultural competence, able to provide that culturally responsive support. For military spouses specifically, concerned that employers may not understand or be able to accommodate unique employment needs associated with factors such as frequent relocation or temporary family separation. Many large organizations today now designate what are called military talent liaisons within their organizations who are informed about military employee needs and employer resources for support. Contact information for these professionals can often be found on employer military hiring web pages and also on LinkedIn. The federal government, of course, is another employment avenue that may be culturally responsive to military family needs. Some federal roles are also eligible for non-competitive military hiring under the Military Spouse Non-Competitive Appointment Authority, which gives agencies the ability to appoint certain military spouses without using traditional competitive examining procedures. It's important, however, to note that this authority does not entitle military spouses to an appointment over any other applicants because it's at the discretion of the agency. But both military talent liaisons and non-competitive military hiring can help military spouses who are looking for employers who get it connect to those employment opportunities. Military spouses often report feeling like they have to reinvent themselves professionally after each move, especially when they spend time away from the paid workforce. I have certainly experienced this relocating once a year for 7 years with the military. Um, Oftentimes, when we arrive to a new military installation, after doing all of those administrative, family kind of labor and settling responsibilities, it can feel overwhelming to start over. Um, Military spouses may also discover new interests and seek on the job training to transition into new fields when they relocate. Fellowship programs like the DoD Military Spouse Career Accelerator and Hiring Our Heroes fellowships are great resources for this. They help match currently serving military spouses with participating companies that offer on-the-job training that can help facilitate entry into new fields. Both programs are 12 weeks and offer opportunities nationwide. Many nonprofits and employers offer similar programs, such as one of my personal favorites, the Dog Tag Fellowship, that is a fellowship around small business ownership, particularly bakeries out of the DC area. T-Mobile also offers a returnship program that's designed to train and educate returning professionals to certain industries such as, again, technology, STEM, and small business spaces. Making military spouses aware of these types of resources can help address individual level challenges associated with skill gaps and also demonstrate pathways into employment, new fields of employment that don't require, for example, pursuing another bachelor's degree or attending higher education altogether. While helping military spouses find jobs is the first step in providing holistic employment support, ample resources also exist to support employed military spouses' career advancement, so they can also develop professionally alongside their spouses. We'll speak specifically about workshops, networking and mentorship, scholarships, and career coaching. So far, we've primarily considered military spouses who are not employed and wish to be. But as I stated at the beginning of the presentation, underemployment is another individual level barrier that can influence military spouse overall health. The 2020 Military Spouses in the Workplace study conducted by Hiring Our Heroes found that about half of surveyed military spouses who reported being employed, either part-time or full-time, experienced at least one type of underemployment, whether that was in terms of the status of their current role, skills required, hours worked, or their income. Hiring Our Heroes offers what are called Amplify workshops, both in person and online, to help military spouses enhance their public speaking skills, negotiation, and branding skills that are necessary for career advancement. Professional certifications may also increase military spouse employability. Onward to Opportunity is a program by the Daniello Institute for Veterans and Military Families out of Syracuse University. They offer professional certification courses in information technology, business management, and customer service. These certification courses may also be available through local community colleges and have the possibility to be funded through the MyCAA, My Career Advancement account benefits for eligible spouses. Udemy is also a free available resource through SECO that offers on-demand training with 35,000 hours of content. So honing professional development skills is another area that may be a proactive strategy to helping military spouses maintain their employment in anticipation of an upcoming PCS. Another environmental barrier that may influence military spouses' access to meaningful and long-term employment is their professional networks. The vast majority of military spouses are women, and for professionals overall, sociological research indicates that women's professional networks tend to be more kinship-oriented rather than associated with professional context. As many of you mentioned in the chat, social isolation is also a commonly reported mental health challenge among military spouses, which may be exacerbated by frequent relocation and relocation to communities lacking military family networks and resources for those who work from home. These environmental and military influences can be mitigated by national groups designed to connect military spouse professionals across shared work and professional interests. For example, Hiring Our Heroes offers the virtual military spouse professional network, as well as local chapter meetups to connect military spouses, share resources, and build that sense of community. If military spouses are looking for professional mentorship, American Corporate Partners also offers a mentor matching program that can connect spouses virtually over similar professional interests. Both opportunities are great ways for military spouses to expand their professional networks, supporting not only their mental health, but also their long-term employment prospects. If they'd like to try a new career field or industry, but are having trouble getting their foot in the door, these resources are fantastic opportunities to help them make that transition. According to Defense Manpower Data Center analysis from 2018, 89% of military spouses have pursued some level of college education, yet only 28% have earned a bachelor's degree. There may be many environmental, military, and individual level factors that impede military spouses' educational attainment. Again, frequent relocation, challenges transferring credit between institutions, financial health of the military family, childcare needs, among others. SECO offers virtual career coaching to help direct military spouses to resources for continuing education and professional advancement, along with a virtual scholarship board for military affiliated students to identify opportunities for financial support. Whether considering enrolling or attempting to matriculate through a degree program, career coaches can help military spouses navigate their professional options, including by identifying environmental level community programs that may further support their goals. In addition to finding a great job and growing in a career, military spouses also need support maintaining employment through the military life cycle. Now we'll discuss how resources for entrepreneurial support, job flexibility, affinity networks, and licensure reciprocity can mitigate many of the military environmental factors we've identified as posing barriers to job portability. Entrepreneurship may be a sustainable employment avenue for military spouses given its portability. In fact, in 2022, the US Chamber of Commerce reported there were 26,000 military spouse small business owners, many of whom I shop for gifts and family necessities from on a regular basis. Many organizations offer virtual training and resources to support new military spouse small business owners, particularly as they transition between military installation communities, which may be a unique challenge for entrepreneurs compared to the general entrepreneur population. The Entrepreneur Toolkit is a helpful guide for military spouses beginning their entrepreneurial journey. The Institute for Veterans and Military Families one-day entrepreneurship training events called Ignite also share these resources specifically for military spouse small business owners in an in-person setting, allowing folks to find, again, professional support doing what they are doing for their career, extending that resource beyond just the one-day workshop to a network of colleagues who understand the military family life cycle challenges. Flexibility at work comes in many forms and can alleviate myriad military and environmental factors that pose challenges to maintaining employment as folks move with the military. The most traditional form of workplace flexibility that you probably hear often promoted in the military spouse community is remote work, which may especially benefit those military spouses whose partners experience high operational tempos and regular family separation. Job boards like FlexJobs, which is available free through SECO, aggregate remote work opportunities and can help military spouses tailor their job search towards jobs that can move with them. SECO career coaches, again, may also assist military spouses with how to approach discussions about transitioning current roles online. Some employers also now offer job transferability, as discussed in Jason's case, which is the ability for an employer to relocate their job to another physical location, given role availability and relocation timeline. Home Depot is a very popular example of an employer with such a policy, though many others exist, and oftentimes advocating for military spouses who are currently employed to maintain their roles requires knowledge of these policies within other organizations if they don't exist currently within a military spouse's employment space, and the skills that SECO career coaches and also workshops, as discussed previously, can help military spouses gain to advocate for this need among military spouse employees within an organization. Military spouse applicants may also advocate for alternative work schedules, hours, or paid time off during military transition periods. This is becoming increasingly common in organizations with large numbers of military spouse employees such as PCS leave and flexible work schedules during periods of family separation. Military spouses may also seek reimbursement for recertification costs associated with state-specific licensure after they move. Again, these are small yet very significant forms of flexibility that may make the difference between continued employment and the ultimate resignation for military spouses navigating other barriers to employment and their overall health as they relocate. Loneliness is a top reported challenge facing military spouses overall, but may be a particular issue for those employed within large organizations with few military family member employees who can relate to military life stressors and benefits. This individual barrier is addressed by what are called affinity or interest groups offered by employers, and national organizations that bring together military family members for community and connection. Some large organizations like Starbucks have well-known armed forces networks, while other national organizations like the Veteran Spouse Network Social Club, Society of Military Spouses in STEM, include military spouse professionals from across employers and industries in the event that an employer does not have a specific military spouse affinity group. These groups offer virtual message boards and resources online for supporting military spouse well-being. Certainly, if you are working with a military spouse that has a particular passion or drive for supporting other military spouses within their occupation or their employer, these are low-hanging fruit opportunities that a military spouse might advocate for helping lead or develop in an organization to provide not only support for themselves, but other peers. Now that we've discussed a variety of resources that can be offered in combination to support holistic employment needs, let's return to our original examples and discuss how these resources might apply to the employment challenges facing Jason and Jackie. As you may recall, Jackie is working as a pharmacy manager for a national pharmacy chain. Her family's moving to New Mexico. She plans to use their job transferability policy, but her pharmacy chain does not have offices in New Mexico. They also don't have any open pharmacy manager roles, and she's not interested in becoming a retail associate because it offers a much lower hourly wage than her current salary. She's not sure if she can keep her pharmacy license when she moves. She's concerned about the cost, and her family is moving during the summer, so they have summer childcare needs. Earlier, we identified a variety of individual level barriers, military level barriers, and environmental barriers influencing Jackie's employment prospects. Now that we've discussed some of these DoD, federal, nonprofit, and employer resources, what would you recommend to Jackie to help her maintain employment through this PCS or find support through this challenging transition? These certainly don't need to be resources we've discussed in this presentation, but I'd love to hear from you what recommendations you have. Great. Ideas coming in already. Chanel suggested remote work. I think that's a great idea. As a pharmacy manager, there may be aspects, STEM aspects, technical healthcare related roles that are fully remote that would allow Jackie more flexibility to support changing operational tempo of her partner and access to employment in a remote area. As we discussed, there are online job boards specifically focused on remote work that are available free to military spouses through SECO. One of note called Flex Jobs, as well as virtual hiring fairs. Yes, licensure reciprocity is also mentioned here. Oftentimes, military spouses, particularly in the healthcare field, find it overwhelming thinking about relocating and having to submit for new state licensure, even licensure within their own organizations. There are resources available, specifically reimbursement resources for licensure change costs that military spouses can access to help mitigate some of that challenge. Of course, there's still the labor of making it happen, and that's where support from peers and other military spouse working professionals, particularly in that field, can offer support. Those little administrative strategies to get around red tape. What other resources might benefit Jackie navigating this transition, preparing in particular for her first PCS? A top of mind resource for me, thinking about anyone who's managing their first move, is affinity groups or peer support. These don't always have to be folks in the same occupation or profession, just other people who are managing all of these challenges that you all previously identified with getting childcare together, maybe finding a community workspace. If Jackie does transition to a remote role where you can go get a coffee and sit with some other folks in a room for just that physical community support. Natalie shared support groups, a key support liaison, absolutely. A military spouse professional network in New Mexico is another great resource. Again, for asking those questions about licensure, if that becomes relevant for Jackie. Chris shared anticipating that there will be other PCSs and having a career path. Consider how her skills might be applicable to other career paths. That's a great suggestion. I'm thinking about some of these training workshops that are available. Previously, someone suggested making use of military installation resources those career readiness resources, or we can just start to think about what other employment prospects might be available that would be easier to navigate via relocation if that's something Jackie chooses to pursue. Of course, helping military spouses find and maintain meaningful long-term employment is our goal. If Jackie finds these barriers to be a consistent part of her military family life, she might choose to leave the workforce. And if that's not what she wants to do, we know that that can have negative health outcomes. So certainly having a conversation with Jackie about career coaching resources, educational resources within the community may also be helpful. Miss Susan shared a portability map for licensure in the chat to see how it matches up with New Mexico. It's a great resource. As soon as your military spouses in your communities that you're working with start talking about, hey, my partner said we might have a PCS coming soon, you can start to think about these things. Where are you looking at relocating? What is available in those spaces? As we know, job development and career development processes are a lifelong journey, but also require some investment in time. So knowing as early as possible that you might be anticipating a move and starting to think about developing some of these negotiation, public speaking, and advocacy skills is really important. Connecting with EAP person at MNFRC to learn about who owns the contract for pharmacy on base. Absolutely. Only a few positions may be possible, but we didn't even discuss this as an environmental opportunity or resource. Oftentimes, particularly in the healthcare field, in the field of education, there may be opportunities available on the installation, and there are likely other military spouses working in these roles. So tapping into these networks, learning what opportunities are available at the installation, especially if you're in a position that they have everywhere, like a need for pharmacies, a need for nurses, a need for K-12 teachers, is a great recommendation. Thank you for that. Anything else to share about resources that you might offer to Jackie? Okay, this is fantastic. Thank you. Let's think about Jason. Jason has a slightly different challenge, if you recall. He's a software analyst whose partner is an active duty aviator. So they move often. This is not their first PCS. His employer has offered him the option to move his role remote, which he's identified as a way to maintain employment and avoid a gap in his resume. But he's having some trouble identifying immediately available childcare options, which makes the modality of working online challenging, lacking dual monitors at the office that he used to have, the lack of ability to brainstorm with other colleagues about tech and troubleshooting and coding. He's also finding that the experience of working longer hours is exhausting him while also taking on childcare responsibilities that otherwise he might have shared with a partner, given his partner's almost immediate deployment after relocation. So there are a variety of challenges at individual, military, environmental levels here that we can have identified as presenting barriers to Jason's employment prospects. What resources would you offer Jason to help make this upcoming PCS and perhaps frequent PCSs a little bit more manageable? Ms. Susan recommended looking into family child care availability, particularly CDC availability, and subsidy care or respite care for family members who are experiencing single parenthood and family separation for extended periods of time. That's a great suggestion. And I think demonstrates how important it is that professionals that are working with military spouses to help them maintain employment through PCS work with a network of folks, not just in career readiness, but also childcare, youth services on installations, sometimes resources that are available for periods of financial strain related to food security, other nonprofit programs that might be available to support even just an afternoon, like temporary drop-in childcare or respite just to get a couple more hours in of work. Nina suggested inquiring about time off or a leave of absence from the current role to get settled and find a new environment that works for them. Absolutely. And military spouse professionals within these online affinity networks and local networks can help share tips for how they may have gone about advocating for these resources. We know that within military spouse communities, many military connected people know one another, but oftentimes military spouses, particularly in large organizations, are the only person with a military affiliation that they know within their organization. And so if they don't have a network like that available already within their organization and they're not interested in starting one, perhaps they might connect with other folks who have advocated in a similar way before for these types of resources, or attend a workshop where they can learn about negotiating from military career coaches who can advise about how to have these conversations. What other resources might help with the sense of loneliness and the transition to an online environment for Jason? These can be resources you've seen support military spouse or military affiliated professionals in other examples, things that we've discussed or haven't discussed. Maritza shared local groups. I love that. And sometimes just the physical presence of others can make a difference for that feeling of isolation. So when I'm looking for support, I like to try new coffee shops. Sometimes I'll invite a military spouse friend, whether they are in the workforce or not, to join me in those spaces and just get a couple of hours in working on my dissertation or other consulting projects that I'm doing around other bodies. And oftentimes I find other military spouses in those spaces who are doing the very same thing. Nina shared the Society of Mil Spouses in STEM group. Absolutely, that's another space that might be a resource, particularly for Jason, who is in STEM, but also a great place to start in identifying peers, even if someone isn't in a STEM space. I'll pause here for any other suggestions from folks for Jason. As I look at the picture on the screen, I see what looks to be a relatively functional office. Not everyone has that when they relocate to a new space. And so another key area for advocacy may be military spouses asking for resources for remote work. So if Jason had dual monitors in the office before and is now transitioning to an online role from home, what resources might be available within the employer to help support at-home office setup? Among military friendly and what we call military ready employers, these resources are often built into policies around supporting military spouse employees. So can a remote office from home be relocated to a new setting for a military spouse at a new installation? Is there a laptop or a desktop or a standing desk or something that can help support them in their new space? Is there a co-working membership that might be available in the area? And all of these are opportunities that might come from environmental resources at a new installation community that weren't necessarily available before. All right. Thank you so much for your participation and sharing these resources. As we wrap up here, I want to review what we've discussed. Today, we began with a broad overview of what public health, medicine, business, and sociological research can tell us about the effect military spouse un- and underemployment has on military family financial, physical, and social health. Overall, military spouses who want to work and are employed report a host of positive health outcomes that reflect the significance of employment as a social determinant of health. Then we practice applying a systems framework using a socio-ecological model to identify how multiple levels of influence affect the long-term employment prospects of military spouses. And we finish by examining how Department of Defense, employer, and nonprofit resources can address holistic military spouse employment needs and help reduce the cumulative effect of military life opportunities and stressors that prevent military spouses from working. Though the examples that we've used for Jackie and Jason are hypothetical, their stories represent real challenges, and I have developed them over several years discussing military family career development in these practitioner-oriented sessions based on the experiences of my peers, those that I have worked with and supported, and the experiences that I have studied and read about in literature on military family well-being. I hope that these vignettes have helped demonstrate how a variety of DoD, federal, nonprofit, and employer policies may be necessary at different stages in the military family life cycle to provide military spouses holistic employment support. As I've shared, many of these resources, as well as employment-related outcomes for military spouses, are discussed in academic literature. These are several of those references, as well as resources from many of the nonprofit organizations, the Military Spouse Chamber of Commerce, Hiring Our Heroes, Defense Manpower Data Center, that help to contextualize the challenges that military spouses are facing. All of these resources are linked in the slides for your support. But I'm also happy to answer questions about what we know from the literature and some of these resources now as we transition to Q&A. You can feel free to drop your questions in the chat. Happy to answer them there. We've also been collecting any questions that have not yet been addressed in a separate document, so be happy to speak to those. Yes. Kim shared a question about male military spouses. It says, I also find that male military spouses seem to have different adjustments and a greater need for involvement and inclusion. Can you talk about that, Carrie? I would love to talk about that. Male military spouses represent a minoritized group within the military spouse population. As I shared, the vast majority of military spouses are women, but certainly there are men who are military spouses who face employment challenges. This is one of the reasons that affinity networks, online resources for connecting military spouses are particularly important, because often those kind of identity-based dimensions, particularly a gender similarity or shared experience related to gender, can help people overcome some of that social isolation. There has not yet been a breadth of literature around male military spouse employment outcomes compared to women's military spouse employment outcomes. However, there's certainly data to indicate that the experiences of social isolation are intensified for male military spouses, given that kind of minoritized status. And so in my experience working with male military spouses, I oftentimes start with questions about access to other folks in the community that might have a shared experience, even if that's not other military spouses, other spouses that have a similar service branch affiliation, other spouses that may be in the same career field, to start to bridge that similarity and interest where folks can gain peer support. Thanks for that question, Kim. It's important. I see another question in the Q&A from Chanel. It says, what resource is used to assist nurses with extending licensure because of their military spouse status? Within the healthcare and even more specifically nursing profession, there are certainly different degrees of licensure. I would direct you to take a look at that licensure reciprocity information from the Department of Defense website. We can drop that link into the chat for you to read about licensure reciprocity broadly. Specifically in the field of nursing, I think it depends on the level of licensure you're looking for and the type of practice setting you're working in. But that reimbursement may be available for nurses who are military spouses if they have to apply for different licensure or don't have reciprocity in a new location. Feel free to drop other questions in the chat related to specific cases that you've seen and working with folks in a particular profession or occupation, identity dimensions, or just to share experiences from a particular region that you might be in or a service branch experience. I oftentimes say in my presentation that if you've met one military spouse, you've met one military spouse. Our experiences are incredibly diverse. And it's important to kind of get that holistic sense of where they're moving, what they do, and what they're interested in their next chapter before jumping into providing resources to make sure that they're culturally and personally responsive. You're welcome, Chanel. Kim asks, as a military spouse myself, what areas have I most struggled in and how long did it take you to learn of these helpful resources? That's another great question. I have been engaged in military connected research and programming since even before I became a military spouse. Um, and I learned about these resources studying the experiences of student veterans in higher education and their experiences navigating that kind of professional development transition from a workplace where oftentimes everyone in your workplace shares that kind of professional identity and set of job skills to an environment where you may be unfamiliar with the structure and the culture of higher education, and also folks are unfamiliar with what you do and may not even realize that you have a military background. I did not personally experience that until relocating with the military for our fifth move for me to begin my doctoral education. And being physically dislocated from the school where I'm earning my degree has been challenging, just to be separated from a military community where lots of folks get the military experience, employers and other people who get it, versus a community where there are not as many military affiliated people. And so there's just less awareness of resources. I have certainly benefited from military veteran support centers on university campuses, as well as local chapters of nonprofits like the VFW, American Legion, Blue Star Families, Team Rubicon. These are just organizations that bring military affiliated people together. And I find for myself that even if we don't have a professional connection, there are not other doctoral candidates in sociology studying military life experiences within these groups. It's just nice to be around people who can empathize with some of the military life experiences that I have that also impact my professional journey. Nina also shared VertForce as another resource for remote jobs by a military spouse for a military spouse, and offers free trainings by companies such as Travelers and TurboTax to meet job requirements and work remotely. Absolutely. VertForce is another great resource. Organizations like Travelers and TurboTax that have a well-documented commitment to hiring military affiliated talent also have these military talent liaison roles within their human resource departments and across the organization, who are great people just to start a conversation with, whether or not you may be interested as a candidate in a role with Travelers, because they're aware of many of these resources that sometimes do take work to find online and connect with. That's one of the benefits of the SECO program for making resources like this accessible to military spouses, and particularly the people such as career coaches and likely many of you who work in this space, who can then be a navigator to direct folks to some of these resources that may be helpful. Thank you for sharing that, Nina. It's a great resource. Are there any other questions related to today's content, military family career development, or resources that folks from the chat might like to share with the group? That is largely how I have learned about these resources, from personal research experience and also a whole lot of well-educated military family advocates in my network. And while I'm sharing that, I often share many of these resources online. So feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn as well. And I can be one of those folks for you as well. And I'd love to learn about you and your resources online.
And Carrie, not to interrupt you, but just sitting here thinking, with all the valuable, resources you've shared, I'm just wondering, what the most impactful thing attendees here today, if they could drop in the chat, what would be the most impactful thing they are taking from today's session moving forward?
Yes, that's a great suggestion. I think crowd sharing what questions remain and also what resources are going to be most helpful for the military spouse and military affiliated professionals that you're working with in your life is helpful also for the organization to know about future professional development workshops. Priscilla shared bringing awareness on resources and ways to improve assisting military spouses. Absolutely. Sometimes the awareness of resources can be overwhelming for the individual practitioner or the spouse. And so we hope that this presentation has been practical enough to help you figure out where do we start with resources for folks and how do we make it something that is helpful and not sending them on a wild goose chase online to find support. Chris found a greater appreciation for how environmental factors can influence career opportunities and challenges, and really honing in on individual needs for the person, for their family, for the location they're moving to. Absolutely, that speaks to many aspects of that diversity that are necessary to think about when we're trying to provide holistic support to an individual spouse rather than a group of military spouses who may have wildly different needs, experiences, as well as interests, given that that changes throughout our lifetime, regardless of our military affiliation. Kayla has shared the access to my LinkedIn there as well, where you're welcome to connect with me. There is a question in the chat related to credits for continuing education that our facilitators can address as well. Kristen mentioned that it's important to remember that it's not a one size fits all approach, and a great reminder that context and circumstances can vary. Absolutely. Maritza shared that different resources provided are helpful, particularly Udemy is one that Maritza was not aware of, but would be helpful for many military spouses who are looking for more and different skills. I think that encouraging military spouses to regularly think about how they can develop professionally, not just within their role, getting more certifications at the job or working in different departments, but also personally. Um, LinkedIn Learning has a variety of free online courses that are available, as well as the ability for a military spouse to have a LinkedIn Premium membership for free for 1 year, where you can have access to the whole gamut of LinkedIn's available training resources is another great benefit. Udemy offers very similar types of skill-based training and certification. Flex Jobs was mentioned from Jessica, looking into job transferability policies like Home Depot's policy and many others. The number of military spouses who have children under 18 living in the home was a surprise to me, even as someone who does this research full time. I certainly experience anecdotally folks that have childcare responsibilities they're navigating in the military community on top of their professional responsibilities. But just the sheer number, if you think of essentially 7 in 10 military spouses having this additional family level factor to account for, is helpful for us as providers. One of our facilitators will be sharing information about continuing education shortly. I believe we have just a few more minutes for any additional questions or resources to share. I think I'll share finally that not only in my personal journey, but in the professional mission to support military affiliated people in their personal and professional journeys, I cannot speak to how much of a benefit I have gained from the resources available in my network. And so among military spouses, certainly having peer support is helpful, but even among practitioners in this space, we are inundated with resources and information about the military community and nonprofit and government resources. And sometimes it can be challenging to figure out where to start with folks, especially when this information just kind of comes at us in a constant stream from the internet and trainings, that kind of thing. And so not hesitating to make use of your professional network as a practitioner when you're not exactly sure where to start with a resource, or who might have the most applicable information for a spouse, or who might just be able to get it better, who has a similar service branch affiliation or works in the same field. that one-on-one connection can go really far, and we can't expect ourselves as practitioners to have all of that information and resources all the time. So a healthy level of curiosity and leaning on others in this space who may be familiar with resources that you are not is one of my favorite things professionally about doing this work. So I encourage folks to build their own professional networks as well, because it does help the military spouses and military connected people that we serve. Matt shared at Goodfellow Air Force Base, their workforce center has a grant funded position where their only job is to get spouses and dependents off base employment. That's fantastic. Those roles are critical for getting those military spouses into jobs. And then these types of resources we've discussed today about professional development and policies employers have to help military spouses maintain those roles are what is going to be key to making a change in this bottom line of the number of military spouses who want to work but are unemployed that just hasn't changed since 2015. There's lots of programs, but I think this kind of individual level support that roles like that grant funded position can provide are critical and maybe part of what has been missing. Thanks for sharing that, Matt. If there are other roles that you are aware of on your installations or organizations that have positions, certainly I did not provide an exhaustive list in this presentation. Feel free to drop those in the chat as well for the benefit of other members in the chat. Priscilla shared EFMP for family support as well. Certainly, EFMP is a great resource, the Exceptional Family Member Program, for those with children with different needs, educational support. When we talked about that before and after work support, that's a great resource. And even when offices on installations or military affiliated support centers may not do exactly what that military spouse needs, if they're getting closer to the type of support or resources to keep them employed, just giving them another resource is a great way to help them in that journey. Kristen shared financial education resources from a mil spouse website that may be a benefit as well. We didn't talk as much about financial health here today, but I think it is clear that employability speaks to the financial sustainability of a military family, particularly if they need that dual income to get by. And given the number of folks who are in homes with children under the age of 18, there's a variety of mouths to feed. So thinking about financial education resources is helpful too. Thank you, Kristen. We've shared quite a bit here. I'm happy to answer more questions offline as well. I'm going to kick it back to Kim to wrap up the presentation today, but thank you all for your engagement, and I'm happy to continue to be a resource for you from here on out.
Thank you for this amazing presentation today, Carrie. It was full of valuable resources, and thank you, the audience, for taking time out of your busy day to join us. Your level of chat engagement in this session has been so heartwarming. Again, thank you. We value your feedback on your experience participating in today's webinar. It is very important to us, so we ask our audience to take a short evaluation, letting us know your thoughts on today's discussion. We would greatly appreciate your response. Your feedback will help us to continue to improve your professional development experience. The link to this evaluation, as well as continuing education opportunities, is available on the event page. When you visit the page, you will see the purple button similar to the one you see pictured here on the slide. Click that and it will take you to the evaluation as well as the post-test link to receive your CE credits. If you do not see this button, perhaps due to having the page open for an extended period, please refresh or exit out and reload the page. To access continuing education opportunities or certificate of attendance, you can follow the direct link to the evaluation, which has just been shared to the chat pod. If you prefer to access this later, please navigate to the webinar event page for today's session and follow the purple Continuing Education button. Today's webinar offers 1.5 continuing education credits along with a certificate of attendance for general use. For those wanting to receive continuing education credits, here are the available opportunities: American Association for Family and Consumer Sciences, the Patient Advocate Certification Board, the Commission for Case Manager Certification, National Council on Family Relations, Society for Human Resource Management, the University of Texas at Austin, Steve Hicks School of Social Work for licensed professional counselors and licensed marriage and family therapists, as well as a OneOp certificate of attendance. A completion certificate will be automatically emailed to you within 24 to 48 hours to the email address you provide. Please note that some agencies and organizations may have stronger spam filters, so be sure to check in your junk email. For questions regarding continuing education, please email ce@oneop.org. Please mark your calendar as we invite you to attend the next OneOp webinar coming up on Tuesday, October 15th at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, entitled Maximizing the Use of 529 Plans for Military Families. You will learn how 529 plans can be a savings tool for more than just college expenses. They can be used for K-12 tuition payments, to repay student loans, and to purchase computers or other related educational expenses. Tune into this webinar to learn more and to gain the knowledge and tools you need to effectively support military families. You can register now on the OneOp webinar event page, as well as through the link shared in the chat pod. Be sure to visit us at our website, oneop.org, to explore upcoming events, articles, resources, and more. You can also find us on Facebook, X platform formerly known as Twitter,